We hear a lot about carbon credit, carbon neutral, and carbon footprint. What is the difference between all of them? So carbon footprint can be done for companies, projects, and products. And for each one of them, there is a different way of calculating the carbon footprint. For example, if we are talking about the companies in general, you know the typical one, the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, where scope 1, it goes for the direct emissions within the facility from the own activities of the company. Scope 2 goes for the purchased energy, and scope 3 goes for upstream and downstream as well, considering the subcontractors, the traveling, and other things as well. So when you calculate all of this, you reach what they call the carbon footprint for the company. And usually it's like the unit is CO2 equivalent. So it's about the CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions, where through equations we will transfer them to what they equal from CO2 in order to have a good unit where we can compare and measure our performance within time. This is the carbon footprint for companies. Now for projects, it's a bit different. For the project, when you want to start any project, you need to calculate the baseline. Like if this project will be executed in the typical normal process, like how much CO2 equivalent will be produced and generated within the project. And then you start claiming by the initiatives you're putting in place, you will be able to reduce your emissions by X amount. Then they need to validate this concept, and upon implementation and constructing of your project, you need someone to verify. And once they are able to verify, now they can prove from this project you have X saving from the emissions. And this is it's called the carbon credit in one of its forms. The other carbon footprint is for product, and this is also very challenging because you need to calculate the whole raw materials used in producing your product. So it goes also for upstream and downstream, and as you know about CBAM, now the European Union, they will identify the carbon footprint for each product will enter the European Union in order to stop the carbon leakage. So anyone who's in this business, they should be aware, like this is my carbon footprint of my product, and they need to reduce it within time. And this goes now with huge focus on the highly intensive energy industries. So like cement, aluminium, steel. So one company, like I have two companies, let's say one company is producing steel, both of them. So one company is saying, okay, my carbon footprint is 2.5 tons of CO2 equivalent per ton of steel. This is exactly the carbon footprint. And another company, they have it as like 1.2 tons of CO2 equivalent per ton of steel produced. So this is the carbon footprint. So carbon footprint, again, it can be done for companies, projects, and products. Now, we will go to other term for the carbon neutral. So a lot of people, they talk about carbon neutrality, and like they feel like when we are carbon neutral, we should not produce any carbon, which it is impossible, because as long as you're doing any activities, emissions will be produced and generated. And this is why you need to keep balancing. So the carbon neutrality in its simple definition. So we as a company, whatever we're producing, we're able to save similar amount of CO2 equivalent. So after all, we are not like contributing or increasing the global warming by producing greenhouse gas emissions more than what we save. So you need to put initiatives in order to balance your emissions. So after all, like when we calculate how much emissions you're reducing and how much maybe oxygen you're producing, or how much you put other green initiatives, so the total equation, it should be zero. This is carbon neutrality also in a simple terms. Now all of this will go to the carbon credit sometimes, where you need to prove that you're able to also reduce your emissions by X amount, and this is where you call it as carbon credit. And all of it goes under what they call a carbon market, which it is something like very huge and big, where you can purchase and sell the credits depends on your position or industry or your commitment towards government. So if we have two companies, they produce the steel, and one company, their carbon footprint, let's say, is 1.4 tons of CO2 equivalent per each ton of produced steel, and the second one is only 1.2 tons of CO2 equivalent per each ton of produced steel. So the second one will have a higher competitive advantage. They will have more capability to penetrate the market, and even they can increase their premium price for this saving of carbon footprint. So this is exactly what we call product carbon footprint. And for each one of those three areas, carbon footprint for companies or projects or product, there is a specific standard for it. So ISO 14064-1, this is for calculation of greenhouse gas emissions for companies. Part 2 is for the projects, and ISO 14067 is the product carbon footprint standard. And in the future, we will be starting delivering certain training programs about those standards and how to work and calculate in each one of those areas. Thank you very much.